Hello, Harold. Harold, can you
Yeah,
hear me?
now
Yeah,
I do.
so you're back home, huh?
Yeah, I got home last Sunday.
Oh boy.
I've been home for a week.
You were gone
But
2 weeks.
no, it's gone for a week. And then last Tuesday, I needed to take my tractor apart.
Your
So,
tractor.
yeah.
What do you mean your tractor? Well, you got like a D8 cat parked in your backyard?
No, I have a small Kubota diesel tractor with a,
Oh, those
with
are
a,
neat.
yeah, it's four-wheel drive. It's
Yeah,
got a 5-foot cutting deck,
yeah.
uh, class 1 PTO, class 2 PTO. Yeah. So anyway, I've been putting water in the radiator for about a year because it has had a slow leak. And when I cut grass last Monday, it like was pouring out. And so had to figure out where the water was coming from. And it turns out it was a hole in the lower radiator hose. And so to get to it, I had to take half the front end apart. But since the hoses are over, I bought the tractor used and abused in 93, and those are original. So,
You better
I,
replace the upper one too while you're doing it.
well, there's actually 5 hoses.
I'd replace all of them.
Yep. But I went and I ordered the Kubota replacements. I think I would have been better off to just get them from the auto parts store.
Yeah,
But so now they're on like a 10-day order. So they hopefully will be in before the end of the week.
yeah, yeah. Well, if you got that much service out of it, those things are they're made to fail,
Oh
especially
yeah,
after
it's just
25 years,
yeah. Actually 30,
35 years.
yeah, close to 35 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, it's been a good workhorse for me. That's for
We
sure.
have a When we go to Oklahoma, we have a friend that has one, and boy, they're utilitarian. You can do all kinds of stuff with them.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when I bought it, which they're hard to find on the market, um, the the compact tractors, they sell really fast. Is I didn't get one with power steering, so I can't put a
Oh,
front end loader on it.
yeah.
Hey Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Hi,
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are the two of you?
Oh, wonderful.
I'm here. I'm vertical, or at least I think I am.
So, do you have any trips planned?
Um, well, project manager told me that they're looking for a trip in May, June, and July back to California for an
Oh,
overnighter. So
oh, just overnighters there, and that's not bad.
yeah, unless I decide to stay a little longer.
That's hard going from the Eastern time zone, though, out there for an overnighter. We're going out
Yeah.
there tomorrow morning we're doing the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So that starts in Twin Cities
Now,
or close to it.
now in Lewiston, Idaho, we're going to go up the Snake River and do all that and then go down the Columbia all the way to the ocean.
I
It's
thought they
American Cruise Lines.
Yeah, I thought the Lewis and Clark actually started out
Well, they
in
started in
Minnesota.
St. Louis,
Yeah,
except there's no way to get easily
I
from
gotcha.
all the way through. So this is just the back end of the trip.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm looking
You'll
forward
have to
to it.
tell me how American Cruise Lines is. I've been looking at their brochures.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to be an interesting trip because we're going with friends and we've traveled a lot on Princess and Viking. And so we got a pretty good comparison point. But from what I've heard so far, it's a great, great trip.
But have you done a river cruise before?
Yeah, with Viking,
Okay. Okay.
several of them. Matter of fact, we did the one in the French wine country, and the thing I was most taken with was the number of nuclear reactors I saw.
Very cool.
But yeah,
Yeah, I haven't done cruise. The longest I've been on a ship was a huge ferry boat with cabins that went from not Bar Harbor, Portsmouth to Nova Scotia.
okay. That'd
It
be
was an
fine if it
overnighter.
wasn't in the winter.
Yeah. But the woman I'm dating right now, she's big into cruises.
Well, you know what we like the best part about cruises is your hotel room moves with you.
With you. Yeah.
That's, and you know, Harold, one day when you get to be a little bit older, as Sue and I can attest to, that convenience is worth a whole lot.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's kind of interesting. So on this trip to London, I left about 2 days worth of clothes at my daughter's house. Upon she had suggested it, and so it
Pretty smart daughter.
made coming home a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
But this way, on the way back, I'll just take some stuff and rotate out.
Yeah. That's the way to do it.
So,
I knew a fellow that traveled a lot to England and France, and he actually had somebody that held a number of his clothes and what have you. So he got it down to where he could just do the walk on, walk off thing.
Nice.
Looks like Fred's here. We're ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave early. I got a meeting I got to go to, but
Okay.
Okay.
I'll miss you next week, but I'll be out following Lewis and Clark.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Okay.
that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, I guess all our regulars are here, so we can start. Okay. The portion that we're going to read this coming Shabbat called Shemini, and it starts in Leviticus on chapter 9. But chapter 9 is really boring. It's just more details about the sacrifices. So I think we can skip over that. And the interesting part doesn't start till chapter 10. I think we'll start with that. Um,
With
and
chapter
it start,
10,
yeah,
yeah, chapter 10 of Leviticus. So, and the
you
big event there really is the first three chapters, chapters one, rather verses 1 through 3. Somebody wants to read that.
I'll do that since
Okay.
I'm short. Now, Aaron's son Nadab and Abihu each took his
Mhm.
fire pan, put fire in it, and laid incense on it. And they offered before Adonai alien fire, which had not been enjoined upon them. And fire came forth from Adonai and consumed them. Thus they died at the instance of Adonai. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what Adonai meant by saying, Those through those near to me, I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people." And Aaron was silent.
That's a really weird episode. Nobody really knows what they mean by strange fire. Basically what they were doing, they've got these metal pans, these fire pans with a hot coal. The fire is hot coal, and they put incense on top of that. The hot coal starts the incense going. One theory is that there was a fire that was kept burning all the time on the main altar. And one theory is that the only acceptable hot coals were from that altar, and they got them somewhere else. So it was strange fire, not the regular fire. But nobody really understands that, and even the rabbinic commentators are all over the place on that. There's no standard explanation. One group of rabbis said that they were sinful guys, and this was kind of a last straw. So they're being zapped for a whole variety of sins, that we don't know about. Then there's a second group of rabbis that said that they basically were good men, but this one really bad sin was enough. Just like Moses was a great man, but the one sin of his was enough to keep him from going into the promised land. So it could have been that. And then there's another really weird thing the Jewish Greek philosopher Philo came up with, which is that a place can be sanctified when a great man dies there. And so their death actually, in a way, sanctified the sanctuary. And, none of those really make sense to me. It's uh, it's just one of these weird episodes in the Bible that you can just have to sort of read and move on. Nobody really understands it. But the follow-up with that is verses 4 to 11. Somebody wants to read those.
Sure, I'll go ahead. And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, and the uncle of Aaron, and said to them, "Come near, carry your brothers away from the front of the sanctuary and out of the camp." So they came near and carried them in their coats out of the camp, as Moses had said. And Moses said to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his sons, "Do not let the hair of your heads hang loose, and do not tear your clothes lest you die, and wrath come upon all the congregation. But let your brothers, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning that the Lord has kindled, and do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die. For the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you." And they did according to the word of Moses. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, "Drink no more wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. You are to distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the unclean and the clean. And you are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that the Lord has spoken to them by Moses."
Yeah. So, one of the strange things here, if you think about it, they say they carried them away by their tunics, but the beginning part says they were totally consumed by fire. So the tunics should have been totally burned to ashes, and them also. So it's not. Oh, one of the medieval commentators tries to get around that by saying the fire came forth from God, went into their nostrils, and killed them by burning them internally. Their clothes were not burned at all. It's a weird kind of. It's the only way to get around the contradiction there. But the thing that's obvious here is that there's a downside to being a priest. It's dangerous. You screw up and you die. There are all sorts of things you can't touch and places you can't go. And if you mess up and do the wrong ritual in the wrong place, that's a death penalty. So it really is a different side of the priesthood that they're showing you here. The other thing that some of the commentators talk about is verse 9, where it says that you can't drink before coming into the
Right.
sanctuary, which a lot of people take that as a clue that maybe what was going on is a Nadab and Abihu were drunk, and that's why that was put in there. That may have been what got them killed when they went into the sanctuary.
Well, alcohol burns.
Yeah, it does. Um, And then the follow-up on that is kind of interesting. It's verses 12 through 20, if someone wants to read that. Okay.
Sure. And Moses spoke to Aaron and to Eleazar and to Itamar, his remaining sons, Take the grain offering left from the fire offerings of the Lord, and eat it as flat cakes by the altar, for it is holy of holies. And you shall eat it in a holy place, for it is your portion, and your son's portion, from the fire offerings of the Lord. For thus I have been charged. And the breast of the elevation offering and the thigh of the levy you shall eat in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you, for it has been given as your portion and your son's portion from the communion sacrifices of the Israelites. The thigh of the levy and the breast of the elevation offering together with the fire offerings of fat they shall bring to lift up as an elevation offering before the Lord. And it shall be for you and for your sons with you a perpetual portion, as the Lord has charged. And the offense offering goat Moses had insistently sought, but look, it had been burned, and he was furious with Eleazar and with Itamar and the remaining sons of Aaron, saying, why did you not eat the offense offering in a holy place? For it is holy of holies. And this did he give you to bear off the guilt of the community, to atone for them before the Lord. Look, its blood was not brought within the sacred precinct. You shall surely eat it in the sacred precinct as I have charged. And Aaron spoke to Moses, look, today they brought forward their offense offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and things of this sort befell me. Had I eaten an offense offering today, would it have seemed good in the eyes of the Lord? And Moses heard, and it seemed good in his eyes.
Yeah, I think the point of all that is, Moses is getting really bent out of shape because Aaron forgot one little detail about one of the sacrifices. And what Aaron's saying is, I've had a bad day today. My two oldest sons have just been killed, and you're picking on me about some little detail about the sacrifices. And Moses backs off. The whole thing's really kind of a weird episode. But then with chapter 11, it changes totally. And actually, chapter 11 is where the Bible gives the basic dietary laws. That's right in the middle of the book of Leviticus. And it starts, with each category of animals that's possible to eat. It's interesting that all the dietary laws that are given here are only for living creatures. If you're a vegetarian, you're already keeping a kosher house. Because there are no laws at all that deal with grains or vegetables or fruits or nuts. Anything that comes from plants is automatically okay. So the laws are only about which animals you can eat and which ones you can't. So it starts off the first 8 verses, 1 through 8, with the land animals. So somebody want to read that 1 through 8 in chapter 11.
I'll give it a try.
Okay, go ahead.
Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among the land animals. Any animal that has true hooves with clefts through the hooves and that chews the cud, such you may eat. The following, however, of those that either chew the cud or have true hooves, you shall not eat: the camel, although it chews the cud, it has no true hooves, it is impure for you. The daemon, although it chews the cud, it has no true hooves, it is impure for you. The hare, although it chews the cud, it has no true hooves, it is impure for you. And the swine, although it has true hooves, with the hooves cleft through it, does not chew the cud, it is impure. You shall not eat of their flesh or touch their carcasses, they are impure for you. These you may eat of all that live in water. Anything in water,
No, don't
whether
stop with that. Just stop with the
okay.
land animals. Okay. Yeah, so basically the two criteria for land animal, it has to have hooves which are split. I mean, it has to be, the language they use is brings up the cud, but it's basically what we would call a ruminant animal. Uh, and, nobody knows why these two criteria. People have tried to rationalize, the kosher laws but there's really no health rationale for it. I mean, there's no reason to think that pork is any more or less good or bad for you than beef is. And we really have no idea what is behind this. But the interesting thing is when they tell you that you can not only eat these animals, the ones that are impure, you can't touch their bodies, their corpses. So this is really not about anything to do with health or diet, really. It has to do with something called ritual purity. And the problem with understanding really these laws is we don't really have that concept in the 21st century. You know, we call food kosher or treif, but that came out much later. The words that the Torah uses are tahor and tameh, which means ritually pure and ritually impure. And you know, what does it feel like to be ritually pure? We really don't have any concept of that. So it's really hard to figure out the basis for this law, but they clearly have nothing to do with health, despite the fact people have tried to rationalize it that way. Um, and then it goes on to, and 9 through 12 are basically the aquatic animal stuff that comes out of the water. Somebody want to read 9 through 12?
Sure. This you may eat of all that is in the water, all that is in the water, in the seas, and in the brooks that have fins and scales, them you may eat. And all in the seas and in the brooks that have no fins or scales, of all the swarming creatures of the water, and of all the living things that are in the water, they are an abomination for you, and they shall be an abomination for you. Of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall abominate. Whatever in the water has no fins and scales is an abomination for you.
Yeah. So again, that's a simple criteria. If it has fins and scales, it's in. If not, it's out. And you know, most people say that that means you can't eat shellfish, but it really includes a lot more than shellfish, because a fish like sharks or catfish really, you know, are not kosher under that rule. And things like octopus and squid, you know, no calamari, that's out also. You know, the odd thing is though, if you compare it with the thing about the land animals, with the land animals, they give you they give you examples, you know, of animals that you can't eat. They don't mention any specific fish here. And the odd thing is that nowhere in the Bible is any specific fish mentioned anywhere. And you know, I asked Rabbi Wilson about this once. He's kind of the most knowledgeable guy I've ever known about this. And he says it's really true, even though, you know, they must have had words for different fish, because they were obviously fishermen back then. You know, the Bible talks about fishermen. Nowhere in the Bible does anybody ever give the name of a specific fish. And you know, nobody knows why. The Bible just never mentions it. And actually, today in the modern state of Israel, uh, the names for fish are really adapted from Arabic. Because you know, when they when they went to create the modern Hebrew language, what they did really was go back to the Bible, to basic biblical Hebrew, and they reworked a lot of the basic biblical Hebrew words, you know, to make all the new vocabulary they needed. But there were no fish names, you know, to take out of the Bible. So they basically just took the Arabic names and reworked those, and that's where you get the modern Israeli names for fish. And then they go
So,
on from, yeah,
where does alligator fall?
we're about to come to alligators. Yeah, the next one is what they call swarming things, which is 20 through 23. So you want to read that?
What happened to 13?
What happened to the
Uh,
birds?
well, I'm sorry, yeah, I overlooked that. 13 through 19 is the birds, right? Go ahead.
The following you shall abominate among the birds. They shall not be eaten, for they are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, and the black vulture, the kite, the falcons of any variety, all varieties of raven, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, hawks of any variety, the little owl, the corn, I don't know what that is, and the great
Yeah,
owl, the white owl, the
mm,
pelican, and the bustard, the stork, herons of every variety, the hoopie, and the bat.
yeah. So, and so, you know, it's interesting the way they do this, though. You know, the first part of the land animals, they gave you specific criteria, you know, the ruminant with split hoofs. Then they go to the water creatures, And there you have the fins and scales criteria. Here they don't give you any criteria at all. They just give you a bunch of birds that you can't eat. And if you look at that, there's not stuff I think that any culture really eats much of. Um, and you just assume that any bird that's not on that list is okay. Um, but they don't really give any criteria for why those birds, are not pure and the other birds are. So that's sort of weird also. But then they come in the next group of verses, they come down to the creeping, crawling thing, which is 20 through 23. Somebody wants to read that.
You want me
Well,
to
but people do eat ostrich. I mean, you can get
Yeah,
that
but
on,
actually they do. Yeah, that's
yeah,
believe what,
I
Howard?
guess
ostrich.
yeah, ostrich meat is eaten in some cultures. It's hard to
Well, you can,
imagine eating a bat, or there's not much meat in a bat anyway, or eating a stork. I guess you could eat a stork. I don't know any culture that does. Um, anyway,
hmm.
in 20 through 23, they go on to the insects. If somebody wants to read that.
All the winged swarmy things that walk on fours shall be an abomination for you. But these you may eat among all the winged swarming things that walk on fours, all that have above their feet jointed legs to leap with on the ground. Of these you may eat the following: locusts of any variety, all varieties of bald locusts, crickets of every variety, and all varieties of grasshoppers. But all other winged swarming things that have four legs shall be an abomination for you.
Yeah. Now, the odd thing though is insects don't have four legs; they have six legs. Which and a lot of the commentators, have raised questions about this. But we don't know. Maybe it's a scribal error. Nobody really knows. But insects, are basically six-legged creatures. The theory about why they're exempting the locust from being on the prohibited list is that one of the really big environmental disasters that they often had in the Middle East were locust swarms. In fact, that was one of the 10 plagues in Egypt. And a really, really big locust swarm can totally wipe out everything, eat everything that's edible. And there may be nothing left to eat except the locust. And that may be why, they exempted the locust from that list. It may be the only thing left to eat, after a major locust disaster. Okay. And then 29 through 38 it has an interesting set of prohibitions about the animals you can't eat. By the way, you mentioned alligators. They would actually come under the land animal. An alligator wouldn't be kosher because it doesn't have hooves and is not a ruminant.
And the
Hmm.
following shall make you unclean. Whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until evening, and whoever carries the carcass of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. Every animal that has true hoofs, but without clefts through the hoofs, or that does not chew the cud, they are unclean for you. Whoever touches them shall be unclean. Also, all animals that walk on paws, among those that walk on fours, are unclean for you. Whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until evening. And anyone who carries their carcasses shall wash his clothes and remain unclean until evening, before they are unclean for you. Do you want
So
me to
basically,
keep-
yeah, go on through 30 through verse 38.
The
Oh,
following
actually, yeah.
The following shall be unclean for you from among the things that swarm on the earth: the mole, the mouse, the great lizards of every variety. There we go. The ginkgo, the land crocodile, the lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. Those for you are unclean among all the swarming things. Whoever touches them shall be dead and shall be unclean until evening. And anything on which one of them falls when dead shall be unclean. It may be an article of wood or cloth or skin or a sack. Any such article that can be put to use shall be dipped in water, and it shall remain unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. And if any of those fall into an earthen vessel, everything inside it shall be unclean, and the vessel itself shall break. As to any food that may be eaten, it shall be unclean if it comes in contact with water. As to any liquid that may be drunk, it may be unclean if it was inside any vessel. Everything on which the carcass of any of them falls shall be unclean. An oven or a stove shall be smashed. They are unclean, and unclean they shall remain for you. However, a spring or a cistern in which water is collected shall be clean, but whoever touches such a carcass in it shall be unclean. If such a carcass falls upon a seed grain that is to be sowed, it is clean. But if the water is put to the seed, and any part of the carcass falls upon it, it shall be unclean for you. I'm not sure I
Uh,
understand what I just read.
yeah, yeah. What they're really saying is, that basically this has nothing to do with health and nutrition. I mean, forget about eating these things. If you touch them, if you touch one of these unclean animals, that it's just as if you'd eaten it. You're impure. So it is one interesting clue, though. You'd ask, what is the penalty for eating one of these things that you shouldn't eat? And they kind of tell you, you have to wash your clothes and you're unclean, ritually unclean till the evening. So basically, if you give in to temptation and eat and you have bacon for breakfast, you have to throw your clothes in the washing machine, take a shower, and you're only unclean till sunset that day. So, yes, it actually gives you the penalty for eating non-kosher food. But what it really shows you here is that this is part of a whole system of ritual purity. It has nothing at all to do with health or nutrition. Because, not being able to touch the bodies of these animals, it raised the question, can Jews play football? Are you allowed to touch pigskin? So,
Why
um,
do you think that they came up with all of this? What's your guess, Fred?
we don't know. There are as we get into Leviticus, there are a lot of other stuff, that if you touch or do, you're ritually impure. In fact, there's a whole section of the Talmud that just deals with what they call the ritual purity laws. And these food laws are just a subsection of this whole big thing about ritual purity. And as I said, it's hard for us to understand because we don't really have that concept, in the modern world. What does it feel like to be ritually pure or ritually impure? We really just don't know. Um, the only hangover we really have from that period, besides the kosher laws, which Orthodox Jews still keep, is the idea of the mikveh, which is used to cleanse impurity. If you go to a mikveh, you actually take a shower before you immerse in the mikveh.
Oh,
And the idea is you're not going to the mikveh to get clean in the physical sense. You have to be physically clean before you dip in the mikveh, because the mikveh is meant to remove ritual impurity. It's a spiritual thing, not a physical thing. Um, and again, it's kind of hard for us to understand, but um, the mikvah, basically, and we'll read about this later in Leviticus because they have the mikvah rules for women in there, later on in the book. But it originally, the only two times that the Torah requires that the mikvah be used is women after their period, because they have to be ritually pure again, and women after childbirth. Those are the two occasions, but it doesn't prohibit anybody for using it for a variety of reasons. So actually, there are a lot of modern congregations in which the mikveh is used for a lot of other reasons. There are some congregations where everyone goes to the mikveh on the afternoon of Yom Kippur as kind of a spiritual cleansing before Yom Kippur starts. There are even, I know, Hasidic communities where everyone goes to the mikveh Friday afternoon both men and women as a preparation for Shabbat. And there are even some feminist groups. I know women go to the mikveh after a divorce, after recovering from an illness, after finishing a round of chemotherapy. Any time in your life you feel you need a sense of cleansing yourself spiritually, the mikveh can be used for that. And so it's really expanded beyond the specific examples that the Torah gives. But I agree that the rules themselves are totally arbitrary. We have no idea why some animals can be eaten and why some can't. And there was probably some reason for it, a couple of thousand years ago, 3,000 years ago, but we really have no idea what that is. And there are other cultures, where certain animals can't be eaten for people like Hindus, who will not eat beef. For some reason, cows are sacred, and I don't know what the rationale is for that. But actually, Islam has pretty much taken on the same rules as far as meat is concerned. Like in Greenville, we have a couple of they call it halal instead of kosher, but Greenville has a couple of halal, groceries. And actually, the rules are pretty much the same as the rules we just read here for meat. So, but you still see people. I still read things where people try to make some kind of scientific rationale for this. You can get trichinosis from eating uncooked, badly cooked pork or this kind of thing, but it doesn't really hold up. Yeah. In fact, the next week, the next parsha that we're going to read next week is called Tatria, which is a whole lot of other ritual purity stuff. It's what people call the leprosy chapter, but he goes off into a whole bunch of other things also. And and if you really observe all these rules, you really have to be careful about everything that you touch, everywhere that you go. It really is a total lifestyle built into these ritual purity laws. And in fact, during the Greco-Roman period, a lot of ordinary Jews have thought this is just all too much. Everybody can't keep every bit of this. You can't be watching, what you get around all the time. And the people who really were strict about that were really considered, holding themselves above ordinary people and separating themselves, from the rest of the community by being really picky about this ritual purity stuff. And in Hebrew, the verb to separate is parash, and so the people that didn't like them called them parushim, which in Greek is Pharisees, and which that's where the Pharisees really got their name. And it was really based on they were really fanatics about these ritual purity laws. They had really a lot of good qualities also. But their enemies really focused in on how picky they were about what they ate and the whole ritual purity thing. And this is really where they got their name. So and that's really kind of a short portion. That's all really what we're going to read this Saturday. It's one of the shorter readings for Shabbat. Um, any other questions or comments about this? Okay. Well, next week we'll get into some more ritual purity stuff if you're up to it.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait. Not the most exciting part of a Torah, but it is kind of interesting in a way.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. See you guys next
Thank
week.
you. Yeah, see
All
you.
right.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Fred.
you, Fred.
Okay.